Hey everybody, welcome to the video today. My name is Carl Hughes, the founder and CEO of Draft.dev. So today I want to talk to you guys about DevTools marketing. In other words, developer tools marketing. I've talked about this a ton on our blog at Draft.dev, but I also talk about it in webinars and with clients and calls all the time. And I've seen over 100 companies try different things when it comes to dev tools marketing. And so today in this video, what I want to do is give you kind of a rundown of everything I've learned about the topic of dev tools marketing in the last 5-6 years, and some of the things that you can take away, whether you're starting your dev tools marketing journey or you're well mature and you've got most of the stuff figured out and you're just trying to fine tune it. So let's get started. First of all, what is a dev tool, a developer tool? So a lot of people outside the industry don't realize this, but software developers use hundreds of tools to get their job done every day. It's things like IDEs, interactive development environments, testing tools, automation software, infrastructure tools. If you've ever heard of companies like AWS or GitHub or even Microsoft and Azure, then you've heard of dev tools, whether you knew it or not. Now, there's a lot of dev tools that are kind of flying under the radar right now. In other words, they're things that are so far behind the scenes that typical people in marketing have no idea that they even exist. And so one of the hardest parts about marketing a dev tool is you've got to learn what the tool actually does for software developers. Again, this can be really tough if you're somebody who's not technical. So the very first thing that I've always told people is learn what the tool does and how to explain it at a high level. If you're going to work for a company that does dev tools marketing or starting one, you absolutely have to get well versed in the knowledge base and the language that developers use to talk about your area of expertise. Okay, let's talk about what works for dev tools companies and what I've learned in the last 5 years of working with over 100 companies that are dev tools trying to market to software developers. First, what works for one company does not work for them all. I've seen tons of examples where small companies try to replicate what really big and established brands have tried to do, and it just doesn't work. A, they have bigger budgets. B, they have more time. And C, they've got huge teams that can actually execute on big, complex marketing plans. If you're a startup, upstart, and you're just trying to get things off the ground with your dev tool, you have to step back and think, what resources do we actually have? What's actually going to be valuable to users? And how can we leverage our unique selling points and our unique perspective maybe in a way that big companies can't do? For example, with a lot of early stage startups, they have the luxury of being able to kind of say whatever they want. A big company's got PR departments and legal departments that have to sort of rein them in at times. And all the messaging has to be centralized and approved by a bunch of people. It's bureaucratic, it's slow. So as a small company, what you want to think about is, how can I short circuit some of that and get really fast feedback cycles and really fast messaging out there? So getting active on places like Hacker News and Reddit, getting out there in the community and posting things, starting discussions and joining discussions, it's stuff that big companies rarely do. So as a small startup, you have that advantage. Now, the market of dev tools is also very diverse. So part of the reason that something that works for one company and doesn't work for another is every dev tool is different. A place like DigitalOcean that does web hosting is very different from a tool like JetBrains that has IDEs for software developers, or a software testing tool. The kind of developer who uses it is different. The sales cycle is different. Is it sold from the top down? Is it sold from the bottom up? Is it sold to software devs who are relatively new at their job? Is it sold to more senior architects and engineers and managers? It totally depends. And all that is going to dictate how your marketing should flow. The strength of each company and the team that it has should come into play when it comes to your marketing plan. So in other words, if you have a team with a bunch of content marketing and writing experience, lean into that and leverage it, whoever your audience is. On the other hand, if you've got a team with a great video development department, use them. And there's no reason that developers don't watch videos. They absolutely do. And one of the strongest ways to get out there and get in front of them is to share content that's interesting, whatever format that is. Finally, the marketing for your tool has to actually make sense given the product adoption cycle. So that's when I mention things like top-down marketing and bottoms-up marketing. What I mean there is some tools require a whole organization to be bought in order for them to get value. Those are often sold from the top down. A C-level executive like a CTO or CIO will sign the papers to get the tool agreed to, and then it has to get implemented and pushed out to all the engineers who are actually going to use it on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of challenges with that, but the nice thing is you typically get really big deals on each sale. On the other hand, there's bottoms up tools. Those are tools like GitHub, for example, where an individual developer can go in, sign up, and start using it today. But there are also team level accounts that can then be upsold to those developers. So that kind of tool, it's a lot easier usually, lower friction to get people to try it. You often need to have free trials, or you need to get things out there quickly to individuals. But the hard part is you've got to sort of figure out a way to roll those up into a big sale if you really want to scale up. Now, the next point that I've learned about developer tool marketing is that fundamentally, building trust is the only way to do developer tool marketing. Developers use ad blockers at 2 or 3 times the typical rate of a typical person on the internet. So what that means is paid ads just hardly work. Cold email is really hard to make work when it comes to software developer marketing and sales outreach. So what's left? Honestly, content. And that content can take many different forms, and you've got to be a little creative here. My background is more in content writing and video production, but we've also seen clients do things like events, which are essentially live content, very well. We've seen a lot of companies do content in the form of community content, whether that's actually curating a community or giving content out through their community, or it's generating content from that community. All those things can work. But fundamentally, all these channels, the goal is the same. Build trust with the audience of software developers and engineers and technical people, and introduce them to your product organically and in a way that's friendly to them and helpful to them. And I think that helpfulness and friendliness is key to getting in front of developers. And it's the thing that, again, a lot of big companies really struggle with this, because traditional marketing tends to be a lot more, hey, here's my product, buy from me, me. But you've got to focus on the users. What do they want? What do they need? And how can we answer their requests and their challenges in a way that's fun, exciting, and helpful? The next thing I've learned about developer tool marketing is that consistency over time beats all the hacks and trends in the world. You'll see often people on Twitter talking about the latest hack that they use to grow their software as a service company or to get 1,000 users and things like that. And I'm not saying you should never try those. I'm not saying that they never work. They absolutely can and do occasionally. But I'll tell you this from experience, the hit rate is something like 1 in 100, whereas more tried and true consistency over time-based methods tend to pay off at a higher rate. It's kind of like the difference between people who pick individual stocks and people who go out there and put their money into the S&P 500 or some index fund. Honestly, like every now and then somebody who picks a stock gets lucky and Tesla goes to 1,000 or whatever, right? But generally, most people lose when they pick stocks. And so as a marketing team in DevTools marketing, what you want to think about is, what is our tried and true S&P 500 for our kind of company? Again, this goes back to what kind of channels can we use to build trust with our developer audience? And how do we do those consistently and repeatably? So often what people will do is they'll overinvest in one channel early and try it at the expense of all other channels. And what this leads to is a kind of burnout where you don't get the results that you thought you were going to get, and you get really annoyed and you just think that doesn't work. For example, if you went out and said, I want to start a blog, I'm going to write 100 blog posts and I'm going to get them all published as quickly as possible, but you didn't know enough about how to actually circulate that content, how to syndicate it, how to build backlinks to it, how to actually make sure you're getting feedback from your audience as you're writing it and that it's working, you're going to miss out on a lot of the opportunities. So it's better to go for approaches that are slow, steady, and build over time than shooting your shot all at once. Now, this is really tough for venture funded companies because you're under a tight timeline, and I get it. I'm totally aware of that. But that's where things that are not so much hacks, but unique advantages need to come into play. What I mean by that is founders who can go out there and rally people around them at an event, or go out there and discuss their product and what problem it solves on podcasts or on webinars, or out there in free and open platforms like blogging platforms or on social media. Founders who are willing to get involved in that early stage marketing often make a big difference. Founders who are unwilling or afraid of getting into marketing, or they think marketing is something they can just toss over the fence, proverbially speaking, to a DevRel or dev marketing person, are almost always at a huge disadvantage when it comes to DevTools marketing. Related to consistency, you also want to think, if you have a long time horizon, how can I build up a library of content that will continue to build in value over time? These could be sample projects. They could be open source things that people can contribute to. They could be written content. It could be video content. It could be great documentation even. All those are forms of dev marketing that essentially allow a company to build up this annuity that pays off over time. They can be interlinked together. They can sort of spawn other types of content. For example, a lot of companies we work with will start with a blog post about a topic. That blog post then becomes a video, say, that they post on the internet. And that becomes a conference talk that they can then go circulate and pitch variations of at various conferences and meetups. Really great way to take one core piece of content and spin it out for lots and lots of value. The last thing I've learned about DevTools marketing is that marketing is the very last department to get credit for good work and the very first one to get blame when things go wrong. Here's what I see over and over again with especially seed to Series A stage companies, but it's even happened at some bigger companies that we've worked with. The marketing team gets put in charge of putting out the word on some sort of half-built janky product that doesn't have great documentation, and they really struggle because they don't know who the product is really built for. They don't fully understand the challenges that devs run into. And if the product itself doesn't make that obvious, it's very easy for a developer marketing team to struggle and lose. They can try to do things like generate content, but if it's not clear how that content ties into the core product, you can lose a lot of cycles on just generating content that generates traffic, but no actual conversions, which is what we really want. And when things go poorly, inevitably after that, the marketing team gets cleared out. The founders say, hey, it's marketing's fault. We couldn't get this thing off the ground. All of them are gone. Let's start over. This is really, really brutal. And I think, honestly, it's short-sighted. What it says is that you don't believe that marketing teams can learn from their mistakes and sort of iterate just like you would a product team or engineering team. I think it's sort of a weakness of DevTools marketing in general, is that teams are often too quick to blame marketing when things don't go perfectly, and instead too focused on getting the product perfect and thinking that's going to be their answer. Okay, the last thing that I've learned about developer tools marketing is that there's certain tactics that are just universally a good idea to do. So first, there's events. We're all familiar with live events, and during COVID, those kind of went away for a while. Well, people are back and they're ready for more events. Now, I'll say most of the conferences these days are smaller. There's fewer of them than there used to be, but are developers coming to them? Absolutely. I went to KubeCon this year. Amazing turnout, tons of people, tons of vendors, really interesting place, lots of cool stuff being talked about. You need to be part of events in your space if you're in developer tools marketing. There's just no way around it. The next tactic that comes up just as often is written content. And that's why I started Draft.dev. It's really what we focus on, but we do video now as well. With written content, the whole thing you want to do is provide value to software engineers while showing them how your product might actually solve some of their problems. There's a lot of ways you can do this, and I've talked about this a lot on our blog, and I'll talk about it more in future webcasts. But ultimately, we've got to build trust, like I said. And so one of the things that you really want to think about is how can we create a content plan or a content strategy that revolves around building trust, being authentic and helpful to developers. Next, there's video content. And again, much like written content, it's just another format. I find that video tends to skew a younger audience. In other words, people 35, 40 and up right now are typically going to go to the written document first, whereas people under that cutoff, maybe 30, 35, somewhere in there, are probably going video first. So it's really interesting to see companies having to do both now to make sure they're reaching all segments of the developer market, because those 35-year-olds are becoming middle managers now. They're becoming a little more influential in their organization. Next, we've got community-driven marketing. This one can be really tough and the payoff period can be very long, but a lot of people try it and succeed with it. And that's basically building up an internal community or controlled community of people who support your product. You've seen this with a lot of really good brands that have built long-term followings and standings, and it's because they've done such a good job curating a community that really cares about and passionately advocates for their product. Hard to do, but huge payoff in the long run. And then finally, there's social media. And social media with devs is a little tricky. They're on places like LinkedIn and Twitter, but again, they're pretty averse to advertising. And so you've got to be very subtle in your approach. Very few brands do social media for devs well. That said, I think social media is a great place to learn about how users like, interact, and use your product. So if you're a DevTools company and you're trying to use social media, the number one thing you've got to do is listen. If you're just out there shooting out everything that you did with your brand and how great it is, you're not going to get any attention. But if you're out there listening and engaging in the interesting conversations, the places like Reddit and Hacker News where those conversations are happening, you're absolutely going to be part of that whole movement of what people are talking about, which gives you great fuel for things to write on the blog, things to talk about in your videos, things to go to conferences and pitches as talks there. So keep an eye out for social media. All right, so that's everything I've learned about DevTools marketing in the last 5 years since I started Draft.dev. If you want to talk more about technical content or just marketing for developers in general, give me a call sometime. Carl@Draft.dev. You can email me, we'll set up a call, or you can just find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Looking forward to keeping up, and subscribe below if you want more content like this.